I'm Sammy Aaron. I know many of you on the call today, the founder of the Resilient Activist, and we are absolutely delighted to have Julie Koppen from Greenability Magazine and other environmental endeavors with us today, just talking about such a deep, long-standing practice of being deeply connected to nature. And so that's going to be great. I want to begin with, I'm going to share my screen just to begin here, and to start our meeting with our Indigenous land acknowledgement. And just to honor that here in the Kansas City area, which is where we're broadcasting from, we'll just use that word today, that I'd like to acknowledge that this program is on the ancestral lands of the Osage, the Kaw, the Kickapoo, and the Sioux Native American tribes. We honor our Indigenous elders and know we have much to learn from them about how to live in deep connection to the natural world. And I encourage everyone to, for the next book that you read, just Google great books on Indigenous wisdom and especially original message, because it's some very interesting topics that we can all learn. I want to start off with something, even Julie doesn't know that I'm doing this today, but I received an email, let me find it here, from a close friend of mine who sent me an email this morning, and she is an attorney with the Environmental Protection Agency. And here's her email. Her email says, EPA reboots climate change website. This is from March 18th. As part of the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to action on climate change and restoring science, EPA is taking the first step in a relaunch of its climate change website. And for the first time in 4 years, EPA now has a webpage to guide the public to a range of information, including greenhouse gas emissions data, climate change impacts, scientific reports, and existing climate programs within EPA and across the federal government. And there's a sweet video by Michael Regan, who's the director of the EPA, where the primary objective of the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm all choked up, is environmental justice. So part of the Resilient Activist is to acknowledge the emotional impact that these things have on us. And I've been crying all morning because this is so important. This is so, in such a joyous way, right? This is really an emotional thing to happen. So we can all take a deep breath, know that the EPA has our backs once again, right? And the work that we do will be supported in the best way that our government can possibly do. And will it be perfect? Hell no, but it's gonna be as best as they can do, and it's gonna be of great value. So, okay. So here we go. We're going to start off with letting Julie just introduce herself. So Julie, I'm going to let you take this however you would like. I am going to highlight you, spotlight of Julie. So, and I would invite everyone to please mute yourselves unless you have something you'd like to say, okay? So Julie, just whatever you would like to share about yourself, your family, your history, your environmental journey, just take it away.
Well, first of all, Sammy, thanks for inviting me. As I told you when you said, hey, I want you to be part of my visionary activist conversation, would you want to do this? I thought, I'm not the visionary activist. I tell the stories of people that are visionary activists. That's my job. But you know, you've helped me realize that, yes, I've had a life of finding my way in our natural world and then finding lots of ways to protect it and then educate other people about their role and everything that we can do together. So anyway, thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody who joined today. I thought no one will show up because it's the first day of spring and the sun is shining. And I've already been in my garden. So yeah. And I just told Sammy I have lettuce and I have spinach that somehow survived our winter. And it's like this big. So anyway, just happy spring, everyone. So as you know, I'm the publisher of Greenability, and here's some of the paper magazines back here on my wall, on my beautiful recycled display case that my husband made for me out of recycled wood and old curtain rods. Anyway, that's how I started. But I didn't just start by saying, hey, I think I want to do a magazine. And I didn't go to college thinking, gee, hey, I want to do a magazine. It's the culmination of so many things that got me here. And I didn't start young in life either. I was 50 when I started it back in 2007. There's the math. But I think all of us have life experiences that take us different places. And for me, this was what I knew how to do in a way that I could bring to our world and say, how can I help make things better? So when I first started Greenability, I had experience professionally. My degree was in journalism, so it's not like I didn't know how to write. I did. And I worked at a newspaper as a reporter and then an editor very, very early in my career. I covered Bill Clinton when he ran for governor the first time because I was at a paper in Little Rock, Arkansas. So that dates me. And then I spent most of my career as a consultant, a public relations and marketing consultant, because I was having kids and there was no system in our system for me to have kids and still take care of my kids without dropping them in daycare every day. And I had a lot of kids. So that was my way to be able to work from home. And in that process, I've had jobs with other organizations. You know, I was at Rockhurst High School for 10 years as their public relations and marketing director. I most recently helped start Print Forest, a new company for Postie cards, which is a very environmentally friendly printing company. And in that process, I was doing Greenability. So professionally, lots of things got me to this place because I learned how to write. I made a lot of connections, but the environmental piece came from my own experiences of loving to be out in nature. From the time I was a kid, I loved to ride my bike to Roanoke Park because I live in Midtown. I've always lived in Midtown, except for when I haven't been in Kansas City. And Roanoke Park, if you're not familiar with it, is like a 35-acre park, and a lot of it's wooded. It's unbelievable. And so, you know, I used to spend time down there. And I also spent time in the garden, but because my dad influenced me. He was a big gardener, and he was an organic gardener before that even was hardly a word or cool. But I think it was mostly because he had 5 kids, and he figured, why would I put chemicals down when I've got 5 kids who can dig up those weeds? So some of that wasn't as fun. But it got me to wanting to be part of the earth. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do I be a good gardener? And you know, I love Sammy always starts with something from, you know, about the indigenous land and the indigenous people. And one of my very first things was reading a book on Native American gardening, or not even gardening, you know, food. And so my kids laughed because I made little mounds in the backyard, and I did, if you're familiar at all with the 3 Sisters, which is where you plant corn in the middle of your mound, and then you put squash around it, and then you put peas in there or beans in there, and everything supports the other plant. You know, the squash covers the ground and keeps the weeds out. The corn stalk grows up, and the beans wind around it and use it as a growing stalk. And then the beans fix nitrogen in the ground, which the corn needs. So it was like early on trying different things, and then handing my kids, here's your 1 piece of corn, because that's all I got 5 pieces of corn out of this, and you're all going to get one. So anyway, this is a long way to introduce myself, but it's sort of, it's about saying it's a whole combination of things that finally got me to the point where I realized I'm doing all these things. My friends and family are looking at me and going, well, that's an interesting way to do things. Why are you hauling stuff to a recycling place? You know, why are you doing all these different things? This is before, if you can remember, before curbside recycling. And I realized that I'm learning things, and lots of people think that it's either weird or, you know, the expression tree hugger or hippie or whatever. I mean, this is a few decades ago. And it sort of culminated in realizing, how do we get people to think in terms of, this is a normal lifestyle? Like this could be normal that we take care of the earth. It could be normal that we grow our own food. It could be normal that we, and like mainstream, that we do all these things. And so that was sort of the impetus for Greenability, thinking maybe that's what I could do. I could show people that this can be cool and fun, and it's more mainstream. I used to joke when I started Greenability, because it was interesting that people would say, well, is this going to be like a magazine for hippies? And I'm like, do I look like a hippie? No, I'm not a hippie. I mean, I'm kind of, I want this to be like a mainstream, every parent looks at it and goes, oh, that's a cool thing I could go do with my kids. Or every school says, hey, we could be doing that too. So anyway, so I used to joke and say, I want Greenability to be this really cool magazine that was all about living environmentally friendly, but I made it look so fun and interesting that you would do it whether you were worried about, back then, global warming, or you were worried about the trash in the ocean, or you just thought this is a cool way to do things. So that was sort of my goal in the beginning when I first started thinking about it. And I used to joke that I'm going to get on the newsstand. I'm going to get this magazine on the newsstand next to Martha Stewart, because back then Martha Stewart was like, well, it was before she went to jail, but you know, it was the very cool, you know, trendy home magazine was Martha Stewart. And I'm like, I'm going to be next to Martha Stewart, and I'm going to make this green thing seem like, God, this is really cool. So that's sort of my vision of what I wanted to do. And then there was the reality of, oh, you have to have a printer and a graphic designer and an editor and a distribution system and subscribers. Oh, and advertisers to support this. So, I mean, there's so many details of things that I either sort of knew from all my experiences or had to learn. And so when I look back, I think, oh my gosh, how did I ever have the guts to start this? And then I think, well, I had a lot of those experiences sort of along the way, just I'd never done a magazine before. So that's sort of a long way around saying, you know, who I am, and Sammy's going to have to get specific so I can get to the specifics of things.
All right. Wow, you're taking me back a few years, Julie. This is kind of cool.
Do you remember when there was no curbside recycling?
Oh my gosh, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even a thought. Like it wasn't even a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember calling Deffenbaugh and saying, what would it take to get my neighborhood to get curbside recycling? And they had done a test someplace else. And they were like, you know, you have to have this many neighbors, you have to do this, you have to do that. I go, okay, I'll do it. And so I worked really hard to sign up all these neighbors who would be willing to pay to have curbside recycling. And in the end, they never did it. You know, not for me, but eventually the city got the contract, which was great, because then finally we have curbside recycling. But yeah, you know, back in the day, it was like, well, why would you even do this?
Right. Yeah. So before we go into kind of because I want to hear more about the business itself, whether Greenability and Print Forest, and kind of, because I know your knowledge is really strong on energy efficiency and manufacturing processes and all things. And I want to hear more about that. But first, you told me a little story about when you were a single mom with your kids and how you made them go be out in nature with you. And I would just like to hear that story, because I think it's telling, and I think it's really important.
So when I got divorced, my kids were young, And I was just bound and determined that, you know, this is a horrible piece in our lives, but I'm going to try to give you the best childhood I can. And resources were skim, let's just say that. So it's like, what are we going to do? And so getting out in nature was a big piece of it. And so we were always taking these adventures where, okay, think before you had a cell phone, before you had, you know, Google Maps, when you had to get the little map from AAA. And so like sometimes just on a Sunday, I would get the kids and we would get a map out and we'd lay it out on the dining room table and I'd let the kids pick wherever they wanted to go. But it had to be someplace like in nature. And so we would drive maybe an hour or two someplace. Anyway, to see whatever. And so at one point I decided we went camping a lot. Yeah. But so they were out in nature and they learned all kinds of things. And so one year I decided I was going to take them on a camping trip, and I rented a van and I got 2 tents and some sleeping bags and we drove to the West Coast. And I didn't give Sammy all this detail, but anyway, so I'm the only driver because of course the next oldest person in the car is like 12. And then they step down 4 kids. And only 2 could sit in the front seat because of the seatbelt laws. So those 2 were in charge of the map. Anyway, so we were going to go, and I sort of had an idea, but I let the kids, if they were getting bored, I let the kids pick the route. And so sometimes things didn't go well because the kids picked the route. And my oldest son always liked to pick something near a river, so we would go off on whatever. And when things went wrong, I don't know how this started, but we had this little expression. It's like everybody would start getting nervous. We're lost. You know, there's a storm coming, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, you know, somebody in the car would go, shh, do you hear it? It's the sense of adventure calling our name. And everybody would start laughing because yes, we're lost. You know, maybe we're out in the woods hiking, or maybe, oh, we did run out of gas in the Salt Lake Desert. You know, things happened along the way, and yet my kids learned to be resilient. They learn to be resilient when we have the eggs over the fire and somebody tips the pan over and they all go into the fire. You know, they just learn to be resilient. They learned about nature. And all my kids are outdoor kids now, and they're adults. And they're all gardeners, and some of them have chickens. And, you know, and I think somehow I have these awesome, cool kids that are out in the world. And I have 2 stepkids too, because I did remarry. And so I have 6 kids, 6 fabulous kids who are out there doing these cool things in the world. And we still talk about, do you hear it? It's adventure calling our name. So.
Love it. Do you hear it? We're going to have to quote that.
It's just fun. And my kids just recently, I can't remember what we were doing. The oldest one said that, and they all started laughing. We were all outside, you know, because we haven't seen each other inside for a year. We all, you know, it's out in somebody's yard. And anyway, it was fun. So
sweet. I love it. So if you could think back, if you can find some older brain cells in there,
thanks,
and
Sammy.
think about, we can always edit the recording, Julie. You know, if there's something that you're like, oh man, I don't think so, I can cut that part out. I would like to know, what were you passionate about in the 70s and then the 80s and then the 90s? And then, like, how has the specifics of what you cared about changed or evolved or matured, or, you know what I mean? Like, what did you start with? What do you remember was the first awareness that you had about environmental devastation?
You know, from a very young age, I just loved being outside, and I loved being in nature. And so, you know, if you go back to the 70s, you know, I was in high school and college, and I just loved that escape, get on my bike and go find someplace cool. And of course, I was also a bookworm, so I usually had a book with me, and I would just, you know, go someplace and either watch things or read or whatever. But, you know, once I started having kids, that changed. And, you know, I'm paying more attention to what's good for them and I'm working, you know, I've owned my own business for years. So it's this whole, you know, balancing thing nonstop. But I've had some experiences that alarmed me and delighted me. And, you know, alarming things were like the neighbors, and I've always lived in Midtown, the neighbors have a lawn service and they're spraying stuff. And I'm like, what is that? This is a long time ago, 80s. And then I find out that the neighbor's cat has cancer lesions on its stomach. And then the second neighbor's cat gets it. And I'm like, well, that's weird. What are the cats doing? You know, and it's like, are they out there laying in that? Probably. You know, so that led me down the path of starting to look at what are all those chemicals? What is Roundup really? What are all those things that people put on their lawn? And this is, again, before the internet. So when I'd take my kids to the library and they're off looking for books, I'd be in the reference section looking stuff up, trying to figure out, should I be worried about that? So those are things that were concerning to me. And then the chemicals on our food. So that's sort of early on things that worried me. So, you know, I'm at one point out here and I'm loving this, and I'm in nature, and I'm a gardener, I'm learning to garden. And over here I'm thinking, it's kind of, you know, worrisome for my kids and for like the big picture. It wasn't until later that I started hearing about, again, global warming, and starting to get concerned and realizing I don't see that in the mainstream media. I'm reading this in environmental magazines that I'm getting at the library, you know. So I started doing some of my own, not only research, but also thinking like, what can I do for my family? So I went and became a master gardener, thinking that way I'll learn all about gardening. And that's one thing that I can be doing, and I love it. And I realized I'm writing my final paper. We had to write a paper back then. I don't know if you do now, but I'm writing my final paper on how to have an organic lawn. And I had to find research at the library from Canada about how to do it, because I could find nothing local or even in the United States. And everyone else is writing about, you know, their annuals and which chemicals will make things grow faster and better. And so I was a master gardener and very active for quite a long time. But it was things like the 10,000 Rain Garden Project, which I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but it was back when Kay Barnes was mayor. And she had a goal of having 10,000 rain gardens. So I put in a gigantic rain garden in my front yard, put the sign in my front yard so everybody would ask me about it. And then as a master gardener, we got funding from MARC, Mid-America Regional Council, and helped people put in gardens, volunteered to go help them put them in, and then Mid-America Regional Council paid for plants and stuff. But I wanted more. So then I went from there to, I wanted to learn how to grow food organically. And if you know Catherine Kelly, who started Cultivate KC, which had a big long name before that. And it was right when she was starting that. And she had a program called Growing Growers. And she's the most amazing person. And her goal was to get people to have urban farms. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe that's what I need to do. I need to find a lot somewhere and have an urban farm. Now, mind you, this whole time I'm raising my kids. I'm the director of marketing and PR at Rutgers High School. I mean, I got other things going on. But anyway, so I take this class, and it's from March till October. And every week you go learn about the soil and planting seasons and insects and, you know, pollinators and, you know, all kinds of organic. It's all organic. And you got to volunteer on a farm. And I volunteered out at the Prairie Birthday Farm up in Kearney. Linda Hessel, another amazing woman. And I learned all about the process of growing our own food. And so I thought, maybe that's what I really want to go do. You know, I'm going to go become an urban farmer. I did have to acknowledge that pretty much everybody else in the class was considerably younger than me, but I thought, I'm fine. Anyway, so what that has done over time is I have become, you know, a pretty good gardener. I can still kill things, but, you know, I learned a ton from that process. And I also was learning about native plants because I was really curious about native plants way back from when I was a master gardener. I just was fascinated with native plants. again, no real resources here in Kansas City. And at one point, I'm looking for what is that next big thing I'm going to go do. And I thought, well, maybe I will start a native plant nursery. These are all big ideas, and I know it, and I look back on it, but I actually did a pro forma on it, and I found a location, and in the end, I realized it's really, I don't know if there's a market for native plants. This was back in the 90s. So kind of ahead of when native plants started really taking hold again. And so I ended up not doing that. I mean, I never started it. I just did all the research and decided no. And in the back of my head, I kept thinking, what is it you know how to do, Julie? You can write, and you know how to pull resources together. And so that's kind of finally how I evolved and came around to, this is where I'm going to go with this magazine. You know, maybe I need to educate people. How do I do it? Do I do classes? And in the end, I came to print because that's what I knew. So it's a whole series of things that have sort of happened along the way. Incredible people, you know, and Catherine Kelly and I sometimes would be on like a panel together, or, you know, some kind of educational thing. And she would always say, yeah, Julie was in my first class, and she's the only one that didn't go out and become a farmer. She started a magazine instead. And then I joke back and say, well, but that's so I can tell the story of you nonstop. I can tell your story and tell people what you're doing. So anyway.
I love it all, Julie. You know, it's always interesting to see the path that people take as they step into their activism. So you didn't start off with a magazine. You didn't start off with writing articles at all. What I want to ask you is, I know for myself, we move every couple years. And so once I get the native garden the way I want it, then we sell the house in the springtime. So it looks really cool, but the garden's there, right? Pollinator habitat's there. So every time I move, sometimes we move like early fall, and I have this physical need to get plants in the ground. I have this, I can't not, like, I don't care if I haven't unpacked the boxes in the kitchen for weeks, because I need to get these plants in before the ground freezes, right? Or I need to rip out something that's invasive or something that has no pollinator or bird benefit. And it's a visceral experience that I have. And of course, my family looks at me like, I'm just wacko. Like, you know, I can't find anything to boil an egg in. I don't have a pot here. Where's that box? And I'm out there planting. And so I'm wondering, have you ever experienced that kind of overarching awareness of the physical need that your body has to do these things? Or when you hear something, you know? And I you know, I didn't ask you, this was not in the list of questions that we were going to talk about, but I'm just wondering.
So Sammy, I'm so laughing and feeling what you're talking about. When my husband and I got married 18 years ago, and we're joining our two families, so now we have 6 kids together, and we bought a big house. We lived on the same block. I was on one end, he was on the middle. And that's how our kids got to know each other, and that's how we got to know each other. So we blobbed together, just call us the Brady Bunch. So we moved a block away to a bigger house. And it's chaos. I mean, 6 kids, you know, all the stuff. And I'm out in the yard, and I'm going, I'm going to start tearing up this grass. I don't need this grass. We need to get rid of this grass. And my husband's looking at me and going, oh, we haven't unpacked yet. I'm like, I know, but I'm thinking I need to get rid of some grass. It's in May, you know, it's like, it's past the early planting time for me. I'm like, okay. So yes, I can totally relate to that. And as I've shared with you, so we lived in this big house, raised up our 6 kids, and then we had this dream of going to a very energy efficient net zero house. And I'm going to tell you just the garden end of that. We moved in a pandemic in May. And I have a patio with 3 feet garden all the way around because it's very small. Everything's very small. And I was in a panic. I have got to get food in the ground. And I had the biggest, most lush garden. I gave away so much food this last summer. I canned pickles, I made pesto, I made spaghetti sauce. I mean, I had so much stuff because I was obsessed. I was just like, we are in the middle of a pandemic. I have bare dirt out here. Two bad things. You know? So just the gardening piece alone. I mean, then I could talk about the energy piece and all the other stuff, but I absolutely can relate to that. You know, it's like, I have to be out in the yard. I was out there this morning before this. So yes, it's obsessive.
I mean, I think it's really important that those of us who have that innate drive, like that we can't not do these things and be happy, right? That's a lot of no's in that sentence, but to honor that, to recognize that I am driven, like the word you said, I'm driven to do this. And especially when it comes to replenishing the soil, when it comes to nourishing your family through healthy food. I mean, I think it's important that we acknowledge that, you know, talking about the Indigenous teachings, that every moment that we can give back to and receive from nature is this glorious moment to just be in gratitude, to be in that connection, because we don't have that. So many of us never have the opportunity or the awareness of how that feels physically and in our hearts. We just either go do it, or someone says, no, you need to come in and unpack these boxes, and then you go unpack the boxes, you know? And so, yeah, thanks for acknowledging that.
And when we were raising our kids, my husband was not really a cook when we first got married, but by marrying me, he kind of became one. Because I would much rather be out there growing the food than cooking the food. And so, yeah, so he's become quite a good cook, and I am so appreciative. So I can be out in the garden and he's making something lovely, and it's really a nice combo. So.
Cool. And that's the visionary activist pieces, each of us finding our own innate passion and skills, and yeah, cool. All right, so let's shift into the technology piece a little bit and maybe talk about what it took to, especially when Greenability was a print magazine. What did you learn? What did it take? What year did you start that? And what support was available to you, both technologically and from the perspective of who's supporting you and your mission, and what were some of the difficult things that you had to go through to actually get that first magazine out?
So there's so many parts to starting a business, and I had been a consultant for years, but nothing where, you know, I had to have this tangible piece. I mean, I might design and write brochure for someone, but they owned the brochure. This was going to be mine. And so there were so many pieces of it, from picking a name to registering it with the state, you know, all of the logistical things of starting a business. I will say that the Small Business Development Technology Center here in Kansas City, they offer free support, well, the classes aren't free. You take classes, but
is that the one through Johnson County Community College?
No, it's Missouri. It's on the Missouri side. It's actually housed at UMKC, right across from the Discovery Center on Troost.
Okay, through the block school?
No, not through the block school. It's an SBTDC program, and they get funding from lots of different places, but they're housed in a UMKC building right across from, right on Troost. Yeah. And they weren't there. I wasn't with them in the very beginning, but pretty early on, one of my friends recommended that I get in touch with them. And I just happened to get lucky and get the director of the program. And she and I met monthly for years and years. I mean, she was just wonderful on the business side of things. So there's the whole business, you know, how am I going to afford to do this? And then there's the logistics. So you know, I knew that in the course of me learning about how to do all these things, I made all these contacts with people. And I thought, that's a story, that's a story, this is a story here. You know, I see these stories. I can't wait to tell the stories. Now I need a photographer, I need a graphic designer, because I've done graphic design, but I knew that I wanted it. If I wanted to sit next to Martha Stewart, I can't do it. Somebody else has to do it. I needed an editor, because even though I'm a good writer and have, you know, been an editor for years also, you need somebody else to look at your stuff. I needed freelance writers. And at some point I realized, well, it was the bonus for me. I loved my interns. So I also got interns because I got to help teach them how to do all kinds of things. So it was like a whole series of people. And yet I needed the financing for it. And so I started talking to people about my idea. And after they got past the, wow, that's either crazy or risky, or why would you do that comments, and we really started talking about it, you know, people would introduce me to people. And so this was an anonymous person. I mean, I knew who it was, but I could never say who it was, who really believed in environmental justice and in environmental work, and was like me, felt like the average person just didn't know. If they knew, that they'd do things differently. People just don't know, just assume they just don't know. And we just need to help them along the way. And this person donated $10,000 to a nonprofit organization with the intention that that nonprofit would turn around and buy advertising and subscriptions from me, from Greenability. And that's what got me started. That was the financial piece. I mean, I'm still over here working my job, my full-time job, but that's not enough to get me started. So that was like a yes, you know, when the universe says yes, and that was a yes to me. It was like, oh my gosh, this person who has some resources believes in me. And is $10,000 a lot of money? Yes. In terms of what I was doing, not enough, but it still was a start. And so it was piece by piece. So I started talking to people, and somewhere along the way, and I was trying to remember how this happened, but this was back when the Kansas City Star had a lot of reporters, and a reporter got wind of it. And so they called me up and interviewed me on what I was planning on doing. So now it is in the newspaper, because I wasn't going to say I'm not going to do it, but I wasn't ready to do it yet. So I picked a time and said, first issue will be out in July. And so then it was just like panic to make it happen. And my first issue came out in July, and it came out as a premiere issue. And the printer that I'd worked with for years, Bolte Hall, they were fabulous. I had done lots of printing for clients with them for years. They said, hey, a premiere issue doesn't have to be like it can be the first issue, and then you can say the second issue will come out, and pick your date. And so I did. I picked, I think it was November. So there was like a gap in there where I was able to go find advertisers. And I'd never had to go find advertisers before. That was something new, selling advertising. So, you know, that was a learning curve too. And anyway, and so then from then on, I published every other month. It was a bi-monthly. And my goal was to have this magazine that not only was cool and told you all these cool things and made everything just seem so neat that you would want to do it, but I wanted it to be 100% recycled paper. Back then, that was before FSC was around, but you know, in the end, I finally got to my 100% recycled paper, FSC certified. I got all kinds of certifications. I won. I came in second nationally, you know, in this big Green America. You know, it was kind of, I don't know if it's a competition, but you know, on how environmentally friendly can a publication be. But that took me years. So, and along the way, I would say probably some of the biggest challenges were the financial piece, just because there was, you know, there were people to be paid. Only one would be, I had an operations manager at some point, you know, some point along the way, I finally decided I needed somebody else full-time. But up until then, everybody was freelance, and they continued to be freelance, but fabulous people, fabulous women who worked with me that, you know, everybody knocked themselves out and went above and beyond to get that print out on time. You know, and I had subscribers, and by the time I stopped doing print, I think I was on about 240 newsstands. So, you know, it had grown, definitely. But the print was very challenging from a business standpoint, you know, and I was kind of ahead of the curve seeing that, you know, because I'm a small operation, and now we see the newspapers going away, and, you know, print is struggling. It's struggling in a very big way. But because I was small, I was seeing it even sooner. And so that was one of the challenges. And I finally had to make some decisions about what to do. Do you want me to go on from there?
No, I think this is, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned, first of all, is how many different skill sets you needed that you didn't have. And how did that feel? Like, were there times when it was just overwhelming and, oh my gosh, don't make me learn something new? Or like, how did you embrace that?
I'm just going to be honest. Let's talk some sheer panic here. I mean, it was sheer panic because, and I worked a ton. I worked night and day, weekends. It was panic because once I've made a commitment, I keep my commitment. I feel this like I'm not going to let somebody down. And so starting Greenability felt like a real commitment, and it's very deadline oriented. And, you know, luckily I had some really good people in my life who could calm me down. My husband, thank God for him. And my kids are hilarious and yet so wonderful. So even in high school, my daughter is helping me. She did a lot of the photography. She did a great job. You know, she was one of my first interns. I had 4 young girls, all from St. Teresa's, well, one wasn't, where our girls went to school. And, you know, and then I realized I really kind of need college kids. So, and my son, I can't forget my son, Dan, my oldest, who he helped me on the technological end, because I'm not a computer whiz, and I really didn't know how to do a lot of stuff. And he was in college at the time, and he had a friend who was also, you know, studying computer science and had started making websites. And so he did my first website. And then as a professional out in the world with a full-time job, because I'm Dan's mom, he did my second one for me. You know, he wasn't taking on new people, but, you know, I was Dan's mom, so I'll help her out. So there's just so many incredible people along the way. Yeah. And, you know, just, you know, beyond my family, you know, friends that would step up and do stuff for me, you know, go handle a booth at an Earth Fair, because I've got a booth at 2 different Earth Fairs in the same day. And so people would just step up and say, yeah, I'll help you out. Thank you so much. So on some level, it felt like I'm sort of running a nonprofit here. And I have so many people who are volunteering to help me. Yeah, but I couldn't have done it without them. The people have been incredible.
So that's such an important piece. There's one of my blog posts on the Resilient Activist site is, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's something about a forest metaphor, building community using the forest metaphor. And there's this whole concept of, well, what does it take to make a healthy forest? And it's not just trees and dirt and maybe some rain, right? It's the understory, and it's the soil, and it's the mycorrhizals, and it's whoever pops in to pollinate and pops back out, right? Or whoever's migrating through and drops something maybe from the air. And it's like, it's all these different, when you look at people, and it's about building your community as a visionary activist, thinking about all the people who, someone who says, I have $10,000 for you. Well, that's your plot of land, right? You got the seeds for the tree, but someone came in and just said, oh, I'm going to give you the plot of land that you need. And then you have these interns popping in as little pollinators. And then there's probably some spring ephemerals that came up every once in a while, or, you know, the autumn color or whatever. So is there more to that as far as, you know, I think in terms of resilience, starting the Resilient Activist, one of the first things I did was go through my contact list, personal contacts. I was teaching yoga and meditation at the time, so that list of people. And then I'd been a software developer my whole professional career and had corporate clients and contacts there, and just started putting people in these categories from that forest metaphor of, oh, maybe this person would be interested in that piece, or, you know, I might contact this person about needing that. And so is there, you know, you've talked about all these great people. Was there a sense that you had been building that audience for years and you didn't even know about it?
Oh, absolutely, Sammy. I mean, you know, I didn't start out doing this when I was really young. I was 50. And yeah, you know, I lived the majority of my life here. I had all kinds of contacts. And yes, it's the printer who helped me here, you know, the same printing rep I'd had for years with clients. You know, it's you know, like, yeah, there's my kids' friends who are saying, I'd like to be part of that. But then it was like when I started reaching out, and this is where you just put on your brave hat and reach out, and you meet people. You know, I started looking bigger and saying, I need to know somebody from Mid-America Regional Council. And I met Tom Jacobs and had this lovely lunch with him and thought, okay, and we connected. And it's like, he introduced me to all kinds of other people. I met Dennis Murphy, the Chief Environmental Officer for the city of Kansas City, pretty early in his when he started here. And he's talking about the Climate Action Plan. And then he introduces me to the next group of people. And it's just one incredible person. That is probably the best part about Greenability. The people I meet are incredible. And each one comes with a different piece of it. You know, here's the city piece over here, and here's the energy piece here, and here's the native plants and the organic food. And, you know, it's like I get to meet people and learn about their passion, and it's all connected. It's all connected. And then in that process, I get to start, and this has been very fun for me, connecting people. So when I did the print magazine, I started very early on. I thought, every time I'd meet like a new advertiser, I think, oh my gosh, you need to know so-and-so. And so I started this, I called it the Greenability team. And every time an issue came out, usually the week after the issue came out, I would have a Greenability team lunch. And I would go to one of my advertisers and say, hey, how about if we invite all the advertisers to come here and you give the tour, you tell your story of everything that you do. Everybody in the room will go around the room and introduce themselves, and we'll all get to know each other. And I did that for years. And that's how people got to know each other, and I got to know them, and then they introduced me to other people. Because it's like, even though some of them in the room might be competitors, it was such a refreshing thing to go do, to like hear all these people's stories and their struggles and what they were doing with their businesses, and maybe get a demonstration. I still remember going to Urban Lumber, and it was right when they started, and you know, they showed us the saw and how they cut the urban trees and how they you know left the live edges. I mean, it was fascinating. So yeah, it's like I try to always remain open and go, one person, like everybody that walks into my life, I feel is there for some reason, even if it's just a little jump, it's just like a little moment, it's a day, it's a whatever, or maybe we're going to be lifelong somehow connected. So I think your metaphor of the forest is awesome, because that's what it takes. This is not just an isolated, I'm in a box starting a business. Not at all. So thank you for that. I'm going to remember that.
Cool. Well, there's another thing that you did that maybe you didn't know there was a term for, and it's called hand printing. Have you heard that term?
Define what you mean by hand printing.
Okay, well, you know what your carbon footprint is, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's ways to measure it, right?
Yeah, so yeah, okay. I know where you're going. See, I'm thinking printing. Yeah.
Not that kind of printing. Yeah.
I know. So, sorry.
I'll say it's faster. Hand print. So it's hand print.
Handprint.
Hand
Yes.
printing.
Yes.
And it's the concept, I learned about it through corporate, I can't think of the name of the organization, but corporate design, that it's a way to take what you're doing and hand it off, hand it out to whoever might be ready to hear that message. And so it's a way, so when you're gathering the people who in some way contributed to the magazine, they're learning from each other. You're giving them the opportunity and the setting to learn from each other, to connect with each other, to widen their audiences, their connection, expand their forest, right? That is such a huge part, I think, of the visionary activist mindset, is not just what I'm doing and how I can be profitable or how I can make a difference, but who else can I bring into this fold? Who else is on the periphery of whatever my mission is that I can help support or that I can connect people with? So I'm inspired and honored.
Handprint, yes, I am so aware. But when you said hand printing, I'm thinking actually printing.
Printing by hand.
Yes, yes. One of the things that and I don't have interns right now, but one of the things that I loved when I was doing the print magazine were the interns, because they had to apply for it. It was an unpaid internship. We met once a week, but then they had assignments. So it was like they would come once a week and I would run it like a class, and it ranged from here's how to write a lead, here's how to write a headline, to here's how to do photography, to let's learn about these things that you might not know about in the environment. And each summer, these were summer interns, each summer I picked, I would let them help me pick, but we would pick something that was of interest to them, some topic area. And then we would explore that topic all summer long. And they would be learning about it, and they would have a series of stories that they would have to write. And then it would culminate in an issue that was specific about whatever that was. So one summer it was about transportation. How do you lower your transportation footprint? And I actually partnered with Mid-America Regional Council during their Green Commute Challenge. And part of what my interns did is they had to get from their location, their home, and at the time my office was in my home, to my home, only using public transportation on this one day. And it turned out to be a 100-degree day. So it's a heat alert day. And these kids have to, and we did all this planning with Mid-America Regional Council because they had resources. You could call them, or you could get, back then you couldn't really get on their website and do it, but now you can, to find out how to get from point A. And most of them lived in the suburbs. And a couple of them had never, ever been on a city bus before. And so they learned how to use that. And then they had to tell their stories. And a couple of them were hilarious because they had never been on a city bus before. And they learned something that day. Now, my kids knew how to ride a city bus. My boys went to Rockers, and every day they got out there and they took the city bus and came down to Midtown on the bus. But it didn't occur to me. So it didn't occur to me that some kids had never done that before. So anyway, so the interns to me it was a like glorious summer. And then, but I would always be going, oh my gosh, we still have to get a magazine out. One year when my office was the Postie Cars, and it sits on 2 acres of native plants. And so I went to the president, Eric Dussey, and I said, hey, I'd like to make native plants our project this summer. And so can we work out in your garden? And he's like, yeah. So they did everything from pulling weeds to transplanting little baby plants, the little starts of things that had, the seeds had fallen and we had new starts. And so they learned all about, and then they had to learn about, the root systems and the water, and they had to learn about all this stuff, and they had to write about it. And I had this one intern, he was this really, really sweet young man. He lived in Leawood. He was in college, and he had never really been in the yard. He never mowed the lawn. He had never done anything. His family hired a landscape company to come in and do everything. So he had no idea, but he didn't want to admit that. And so when he's writing his story, I said, now be honest about, like where you came from and what you learned in this process. And he starts out by saying, before I became a Greenability intern and started studying native plants, I didn't really know the difference between a plant that was in the ground and a plastic plant. I was like, okay. So anyway, and then my interns to go see what they've gone off and are doing now. I've got one who's a city planner in Albuquerque, and the whole time he was great. The whole time that he was with me, he didn't even get a driver's license because he was so committed to just taking the bus and riding his bike. Anyway, so it's all these really cool people, and man, when I think about the interns, I love them. I love them still.
Great stories, Julie. I think what I'm going to do here, it's right about 11. I'm going to remove the spotlight. So hopefully we can all see each other. There we go. And how about if we take about a 5-minute break? And when we come back, if you'd like to unmute yourself, ask a question, you know, there's always, I think we can see everybody on the screen right now. Yes. So we'll just see if there's any Q&A, and we'll just see you back here in about 5 minutes. Okay. And yeah, anybody have anything they want to ask Julie before we move on? We have plenty of time here. Have any questions? Hi, Leila. Hi, Ann. Hi, Brenda.
Julie, I have a son in upstate New York and wondered if Greenability would be applicable to him. He's in Corning.
That's actually a really great question. So I would say yes. When I went from print to all digital back in 2015, what ended up happening is I went from about 3,000 subscribers to like 15,000. And when I look to see who is actually reading, yes, Missouri and Kansas have a lot. But honestly, some weeks I have more people in California and New York that are paying attention. So what that's done for me is made me realize, you know, in the beginning I thought, why would you care about what's going on in Kansas City? But it made me realize the topics are of concern everywhere. And so even though something may originate here, a story may originate here, it's something that's happening here. I then try to find resources or someplace, a national organization that will connect people. So, you know, if it's native plants or if it's, it can be a whole variety of topics. It can be energy efficiency, something that's happening here in Kansas City. If you look at those stories, I will try to get a paragraph in there where I give links for, let's say you don't live here. Let's, you know, it's EV week, electric vehicle week. And I'm talking about, here's the 5 events that are going on in Kansas City. And then I go find the national EV and I give you a connection and say, if you don't live here, go click here. And then you can look by city and state and see what's going on in your city and state. So hopefully I'm intriguing them enough to say, hey, I'm kind of interested in that. And then I want to give you a resource. Some things don't always, you know, it's not always that easy to figure that out. But for a lot of things it is. And so that's how I've changed and evolved since 2015, realizing my audience is no longer just in Kansas City, and it's no longer just in Missouri or Kansas or the Midwest. It's beyond. Pretty much every week I can see readers. I can look, I can't see who they are, but I can see how many. In every state, pretty much somebody is reading from every state. And then I've got at any given point up to like 8 different countries that people are reading from. So my challenge is to find something that your son would, you know, some way your son can connect in to at least some of those stories. So that's a long way around saying, yeah, tell him to sign up. It's free.
This is great. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Hi, Cheryl. I've said hi to everybody, but you weren't there yet. And I don't know who else is on if I don't see your video. So
I have a question.
yeah,
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I'm interested in your comments about the printing side of it. I am in the process now of working on having my packaging for my product be fully compostable. And so one of the things I wonder about is ink. And what I'm learning more and more is that as you're trying to make the most planet conscious choice, everybody has an opinion, and sometimes one is more valid than another.
Yes.
And so I've come across black algae ink. I've come across some different things, and I saved this lid to some eggs that I bought, and the top said, fully compostable, but it's for color printing. And so I'm in this stage where I'm trying to get all my stuff over to be fully compostable. And I'm curious about the ink and putting that in my compost.
Yeah. So one of the things that Sammy that I mentioned is that one of the jobs that I've had while I've been doing Greenability is I helped a company start a printing company. They Postie Cards already does cards, greeting cards, and they wanted to take all of their very environmentally friendly ways of doing things and say, how do we start a printing company so you could print your business cards or your postcards or your letterhead or brochures or whatever, and then to take it to the next level and have it all online so you could go just say, this is what I want, this is how many, and this is the paper I want, and blah blah blah, make all your choices, order it. And in that process, I also was working on packaging. So my goal was not only to have it compostable, but have it reusable so that you didn't actually want to compost it. So I took it to that next level of what kind of cool packaging can I do. So when you get your business cards or, whatever printed piece, you look at that box and you go, hey, that's cool. So I found a company here in Kansas City. It's Pratt, and they're awesome to work with. And everything they do is 100% recyclable. So all of their packaging, they don't do anything but. And if you want to, email me afterwards, I'll give you a contact person because he's great to work with. Anyway, so the packaging, and you might think in these terms, I designed it so it had like little bit of an extra flap to the box. And that's
May I make a demonstration?
Oh my gosh, look at you, Sammy.
Here's a demonstration.
That's my box.
This is her box. This is a brick forest box with a little extra. This is not planned. Oh no.
No, this is not planned. I can't believe you popped that box up. So, okay. So since you're demonstrating, this is awesome. Okay. So the idea of this box was, Sammy, if you'll just open that up, I give you okay. So you see the outside of it, you open it up and see that little line right there. It's showing where you would break it off. So it's perforated and you break that off. Sammy didn't want to do this to her box, so I hate to make you do it to your box. She's not going to.
I'm not going to do it.
I mean, walk me through it verbally. What's it do?
Okay, so you break off. When people put labels and all kinds of stuff goes on the box, and that keeps you from saving that Amazon box or wherever you got your stuff. It keeps you from saving your box. So
so the label would have been right here.
The label would have been there.
Yeah.
And that pops off, and then that piece that Sammy won't pop off, it tucks under. So it makes a totally different box. And then there's your box.
It would tuck under.
So when you get done with your printing, and I'm telling you on that little label that she's showing, I'm saying, hey, use this for something else. This is where you put your kids' art. This is where you put all that stuff that you wanted to save, but you didn't, want to buy a plastic box for it. I want you to keep this box. And then when it finally wears out, which is going to take decades, you can go ahead and compost it or recycle it. So yeah, a soy-based ink, but and I don't know, I'm not familiar with the ink that you're talking about, but it was hard because I'm looking for something that they can use for hundreds of deliveries, and again, I'm not sure what you're looking for, but so I just thought
I have an apparel company, and so my hope is that if I ship you a shirt, the shirt comes out and then that whole thing goes right in the composter. Okay. So what I worry about is the mailing label.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a different idea. Mm-hmm. What if instead of that whole thing going in the compost, that box is so cool that they keep it and you tell them to keep it? So here's the two things that happen.
I'm trying not to send boxes.
Okay. What are you sending?
Like envelope. They have a gusset in the bottom.
Okay.
Because I mean, if somebody orders, 3 sweatshirts, then that would probably go in a box.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm trying to keep the weight down.
Okay.
Make it something that's easy to ship.
Okay, so two thoughts. One is if you ship a box, if you can somehow make the box cool and they keep it, here's two things that happen. First of all, it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets reused, which keeps it out of any
Sure.
system. But also it's great marketing for you because your name is out there. And so they see that box and they remember your company. They remember you and that cool shirt that they got. So it's a twofer, really.
Yeah.
When it comes to, okay, so when it comes to just putting it in like a more of an envelope packaging. So one of the things that I did for a company is they wanted, as part of their printing, they wanted that kind of a packaging. And so I found a company that does it with seed paper. So we made these cool packages out of seed paper. And now it did go in another package because, you know, the seed paper was hard to, so I realized that would be two things you would be doing. But the cool thing is
I have a shipper that is fully compostable and I'm super excited about it.
okay.
And my concern, and even the gum and the release liner, for the equipment, all of that is compostable.
This is awesome.
Yeah. So what I'm most focused on is figuring out the mechanism that gets it to you. And my question is, the label that goes on there that has your name and your address, can that label go into the composter? Or do I need to figure out a way for that label to be removed and then they throw it in the composter? Because it's the ink.
Right.
I have a label that the adhesive is compost safe and the label itself is compost safe. But if I run that through my laser printer, is the laser printer ink?
Yeah, probably.
That's my conundrum. Is I gotta get the mailing information on it to get it to you.
Right.
I have everything else buttoned up in terms of compostable and proper costs. My last piece of is how to actually get the mailing information on it.
Yeah, see, and I'm talking commercial printing where I'm going to use soy-based ink and not a laser. That honestly, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I
You're
totally
both gonna mull on it, right?
I totally applaud you though for going down to that detail because, you know, that is what it takes, especially if you're going to do anything in any kind of volume. You want to figure it all out so that you can make it have the least amount of impact. So really cool what you're doing.
And I have the items inside when I wrap up and I ship. I mean, all of that is either compostable or it is cool and you keep it. Yeah. And so I've thought those little pieces out. My business cards are made out of recycled t-shirts. And so are my tags. And so it's just, I'm down to that last piece, which is the ink that is on the package to get the package to you. And that is this last thing that I found a company that they print with black algae ink and they have all these different soy-based and plant-based inks, which is super cool. But how do I actually get it on your label? Pen and I write your name on it in something that's like, you know, an earth-friendly ink pen. But what if I'm trying to fulfill 30 orders, 60 orders?
Right. And you have to plan for growth and so you're looking for a system.
So it could be something where like the label, you know, this is fully compostable, just peel this mailing label off before you drop it in or something. Yeah. I don't know.
It might be that. I mean,
I just thought you'd be a good source to ask.
Yeah. Well, you've gotten down to a detail that I didn't have to figure out. So thanks for that.
But it sure sounds like a great article for Greenability magazine, doesn't it?
So
and with the question, how can Cheryl make this happen?
Yeah.
You know,
you should email me. Yeah.
I will email you.
Connect with each other.
Yeah.
So before we go to another question, I'm going to share my screen for just a moment and I'm going to spotlight myself, not share my screen, but spotlight myself. So forgive me, but I just wanted to show this. This is a print magazine called Greenability. It might be backwards on the recording. I don't know. This is from January of 2015. This one is from November, December of 2014. Great magazine. And then this one is the one that has these extra stickers on it that says now an online magazine and how to subscribe to it. So I just wanted to brag and I wanted Julie to see that I actually had somebody.
All right, wait. How do you subscribe? How do you subscribe? I need that information.
Take it, Julie.
Thank you. Okay, so it's easy. You go to greenabilitymagazine.com, and on the homepage, on the right-hand side at the top, there's a little form that says it's easy to subscribe and it's free. So you just go, give me your email, and you sign up, and it comes out every Wednesday. So Greenability Weekly, which is now the digital version, comes out every week, and it's just a short, maybe 4 stories, and some advertising that tells you things that are going on this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For
Thank you.
asking, Sally. All right. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay. One of the things that, we really focus on at the Resilient Activist is resilience. And so I'm curious to know, with all those years with being a single mom and then blended family mom, and then trying to make a living, and then trying to start something new, and trying to build an audience where people didn't even know they needed to be interested, and everything, that whole journey that you've been on, what would you say has been the most beneficial as far as helping you maintain resilience? Like, how did you stay in this, and why did you continue to say, well, even though I'm hitting these roadblocks, or nobody else is in, a native plant garden, who's gonna, there's no audience out there for native plants. Well, here 20 years later, it's the thing. Right? It's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to hear about your personal resilience strategies.
Oh, Sammy, I don't know if they were strategies, but
Okay. Well, what did you do?
So I've mentioned my family a lot, and I'm going to say that at the base there's my family. And when my parents were still alive, my dad was the gardener, and he was in it with me. We're going to do rain gardens. We're going to do all these cool things. Hey, Dad, I need to take a picture of a dogwood in bloom. Yep, it's in your yard. He was in it with me. My mom, not so much. She was the encourager, the person who said, you can do this. Don't worry. Oh, I know that doesn't look so good, but you can do it. You can do it. And then my kids, who just thought it ranged from you're crazy to, oh, let me do that. Let me help you. Let me help you figure out the computer problem you've got going on, Mom. We used to tease my oldest son, because if something was going wrong with my computer, he would come and sometimes he'd just like lay his hand on it, or turn it off and turn it on, and it would work. And we'd be like, what? I've been trying to get that to work. So there was the love and humor of my family. And then it just always amazed me that when things might not be going well, I would either get a phone call or an email or just some little message from somebody, and it could be from a reader, a subscriber, or it could be from an advertiser, or it could be somebody that I didn't even know, who just thanked me and said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for whatever it was. This really made an impact, or I really needed this information, or I just so love reading your magazine. And those little things came when I needed them. They weren't all the time, but they would just show up. I still have a file about that I keep in a drawer of all the little paper notes and cards and things that people have sent me along the way that just are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. So that's what I mean about not having a plan. That's like being open and super appreciative and super thankful for what comes to me. And then, if there is a plan at all, it's really get outside. When I'm really stressed out, I go out in my garden, and even though my head is still spinning, I'm in the dirt. And so it calms me down. It kind of gets me to a place like, okay, I can be up all night working on that. So, and big picture, I know I mentioned this to you because I was just recently at the beach. It's like, if I get to go somewhere, it's like, go to the beach, go to the natural beach where the world is still happening around it. And I joke because there's no cabana boys and no little drinks with little cute umbrellas in them, but there's lots of nature running around. And I love that. So, but those are strategies.
I think it's important also to note, even though the beach is what calls to you, living here in the Midwest, there's not a lot of beach opportunity. And yet Huh?
You can go outside.
You
Just
can
go
go
outside.
outside.
Just go
Yeah,
outside.
that you still can connect to the ground. You can still connect to whatever in nature helps you be resilient and just kind of gets you out of your own head. Like you were saying, even though you still had all these thoughts going around your head with your hands in the dirt, it felt a little different. You
Oh, it
know?
felt great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it calms me down, and it would put things in perspective because I wasn't sitting at my computer. I was out digging or weeding. You know, most people don't like to weed. I'm okay with weeding. It's very therapeutic. It's like, you know, so yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to encourage anybody that wants to interject or ask a question, just please feel free to unmute yourself. But my question to you is, I know you're such a humble person, and I'm just going to out you that it took a lot for you to even announce this interview on Greenability magazine in the site, right? You had to be
Okay, you're totally outing me. Yes, I didn't want to do that.
right. And so my question is, my vision of what's a visionary activist, in my mind, you were the epitome of a visionary activist. And I'm curious as to how that feels to you. Like, what of that do you feel visionary, or that you've been visionary over this time? Do you feel, as you express your activism, like, what does that mean and how does that resonate for you? Because I don't see you as a, power-fisted protester activist, right? That's not your personality. So if you envision yourself as a visionary activist, like, what does that even mean to you?
Sammy, you even bringing this up to begin with, initially I know I told you, no, that's not me. I was like, oh, these are the people I talk about. They're the people that I tell you about. They're the stories I tell. And so, but you made me think about it, and I realized, yeah, I did step out there and do some things that most people don't do. But along the way, it was really about, it's almost like it's more than just telling the stories. I feel like I'm kind of the PR person for living a more environmentally friendly life. So, when I look at it, sometimes I think, and sometimes readers will call me to, like, tell more of the stuff, the horrible things that are going on, let's talk more about all this. And the thing is, I know about it and I read about it, but that's not what draws me. It's the cool people that I meet that draw me. And so that's been sort of my philosophy. And so that's kind of how I live my life. I'm curious, and I'm always exploring new ways to do things. And then I'm a storyteller. I love to tell you, oh, let me tell you about blah, 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 blah. And so whether that's just verbally because we're together, or, in print, or, online. So, there's so many things that the reader doesn't know about me. But when you look at what's going on in Greenability, you can almost assume that I've pretty much done a lot of it, or I'm exploring it, or I want to do it. And that's what makes me think maybe you'll be interested too, because I'm like, wow, that sounds cool. So, and I know I've told you a little bit about like our house, when Jim and I had the idea for this house that we live in right now, which we are hoping will be a zero energy house. Our idea was we would run tours. We would open it up to organizations to run tours through this house to see how to do it. Of course, the pandemic hit and we didn't do any of that. And now we live in it. And so now it's more like, now everybody's worried about anybody walking into their house. And when will we get past that point? So when you say visionary activist, I don't really think of myself being ahead of things, but I do think that I will take an idea and go with it. And I somehow have an ability to get people to go along with me. And I laugh at my husband because he's incredible, and he's gotten us to this net zero energy house. And I can tell that story if you want to hear it. But you know, I'm the one that has this big idea, and he looks at me and goes, oh no, you know, it's like, what are we going to do? But he's so curious like I am that he's totally along for the ride or the work, whatever it is. So yeah, so this has just been an interesting process for me to think of myself as that way. Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit about not just the story of your house, but that whole relationship piece, because I know that for a lot of people, being in relationship with people that don't have that same mindset, that are not on the page, that aren't compelled to be, you know, gardening when their house needs to be unpacked, that can be really difficult. And so just maybe, we just have maybe 3 or 4 minutes. If you want to kind of talk about any of those aspects, that would be interesting.
So my husband and I have known each other, well, since our kids were little, and we lived on the same block. And so we developed, you know, a parenting kind of relationship before we ever dated. So we got to know each other. So, you know, he was curious about all these things that I was doing. And that, of course, you know, we got married. We've been married 18 years. And we're on the same page. And so he just retired. He's a residential contractor. So he's knowledgeable about buildings and houses. And so I come to him with, hey, look at this cool thing I just saw about a way to make a house really super energy efficient. Look at this concept of a net zero energy house. You know, like I'm getting all these resources from all over because of Greenability. So I'm learning about things, I'm popping them to him. And then we're talking about, wow, could we do that? So even when our kids were still in high school, we were talking about moving out of our 110-year-old house that we'd done all these energy efficient things to buying a house that we could renovate and make into a net zero energy house. And so this house is a 100-year-old house that we live in, and it's small. So we went from a big house to a small house. So it was like being in that relationship with someone who gets it. We don't need to use all these resources. Yeah, when you've got 6 kids, it's nicer to have a bigger house if you can figure it out. But when you don't, let's plan ahead and figure out how do we get down to a very small footprint. And that means energy, it means space, it means everything. So my relationship with him, you know, even though we've had to go through all the trials and tribulations of redoing houses, which has been huge. I mean, the house that I'm in right now is small, but it was had been vacant for 30 years. And so everything was wrong with it. I mean, everything. And he has done this most incredible work. And like I said, it could be another whole whatever about all the stuff we've done to make this a deep energy retrofit and make it a really cool, livable house on a very small, I mean, it's 1,300 square feet, and we had 3,600 square feet. So all the things that went into that, yeah, to have a good partner who gets it, even though we may disagree on some of the stuff of how to do it, but we agreed on the concept of it. And so he's over there calculating the energy. He can tell you at any given point how much energy we're creating. I know I'm creating energy right now. All I know is the sun is shining, it's time to do the laundry. Because if I do the laundry now, the sun took care of that. If I do it on a cloudy day, you know, it's a behavioral change. You know, laundry can wait, but it was a whole week of cloudy. But today is laundry day because the sun is shining and the solar panels are working.
Here's what I'm hearing. My ears are perking up. I'm hearing a blog post for the Resilient Activist. That's what I'm hearing, because I want to know more. I want to know technologically what you're doing. I want to know what were your choices. You know, if I could have gone with this or with that, how did you decide which one? And then your behavioral changes, like that is so, that's a really important concept that I don't think is talked about very much. So I'm going to put that invitation out to you.
Okay, you just do that, okay?
It's public here.
I see that. You know, it's hard to share all my personal stuff, you know, even though I'm doing it. And
we have a couple seconds in the chat box. I got I got at least 3 people saying, yep, yep. They want to know more about how you did it. So.
Okay, Sammy, fine, put me on the spot.
Oh, there's a 4th one.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I will volunteer just one comment about that.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I think one of the most fascinating things that could be in a blog post or even a podcasty kind of thing is the thinking through what were you presented with, what were the choices, how did you, and then the humor as well as the ouchie points that happened in between, including, when did you butt heads with your husband or whatever, or when did he say something that he in all confidence was right, but it turned out to not be right. I mean, those are the kind of things, of course, really relate to.
I love this. I don't know if I'll share all that, but yes, there were totally those moments where, and he would pull out the things like, hey, I'm a professional. It's like, I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, really? Well, and we had a million challenges with this house, from structural, because it was structurally, it had all kinds of problems. It has a red tile roof, 100-year-old red tile roof that nobody had really done anything with. So water was pouring in lots of places. The basement flooded every time it rained just a smidge. Everything was wrong with it, with the exception of the stone masonry. It's this beautiful little stone house with a red tile roof. But everything else was wrong. I mean, so it wasn't just energy and how are we going to make it net zero. Is my husband's freaking out because he's like, these walls are bowed because they didn't put enough structure in them. And then they dropped a tile roof on it 100 years ago. And the walls have gone like this. I still remember the day I came over here and everything's stripped out. And he has this huge chain on the 2nd floor, which is just one little room, bolting the 2 walls together. And he's pulling it on with some winch thing I can't even explain. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, well, the walls go like this, and I want them to go like this. And in the process, the whole floor buckled up like a potato chip. I mean, I can tell you stories. Yeah, it's more than a blog post. I really thought it's a book, honestly, because it is. And we aren't even talking about the energy, which turned out to be huge to get this house to be what it is right now, because of so many things that had to be done to the walls because they were stone, and stone, which I didn't realize, moisture goes through stone. And so if you start putting all this insulation on, you're going to have mold. So anyway, it's like I said, yeah, it's a bunch of stories. It's a bunch of stories, and it took him almost 5 years. So we are living in our big house, launching all our kids, and we bought this house thinking we're probably crazy. And yes, we were. And he's trying to figure out, what are we going to do first? And so, it wasn't just a matter of like, hey, let's buy a house and put some solar panels on it. Okay. No.
Yeah.
So
I also wrote down Chris's thought about, we could have a really good time on a podcast, Julie.
Yeah, we could.
We would have a really good time. Thank you for that idea, Chris. That would be really fun.
The thing is, for the technical piece of it, I would want Jim to be part of that, just because he's the guy who did, oh my gosh, months and months and months of research to figure out and talk to all kinds of people, locally and nationally. We had people walk through this house and go, ooh, I don't know, You guys.
Sounds like the little house that could.
Yeah,
kind of. But this is beautiful house now. I mean, it's small and it's beautiful. It's lovely. So yeah. Cool. One month, I just have to tell you, in the middle of the summer. So we're an all electric house. That was the other thing. We committed to not having any gas, no fossil fuels. So, in Kansas City, that's pretty unusual because everybody has gas for heat and some people for cooking and laundry and all that stuff. And so that was the other challenge, to find the appliances that were super, super energy efficient and all the stuff. But there was one month this summer where our bill, so this includes all the energy that we use, everything, your refrigerator, your hair dryer, I mean, everything, washer dryer, was $6. And so we know from an energy standpoint, we think we'll hit net zero because you may not know this, but we pay about 12 cents kilowatt for energy. And when you're on solar, when they give you a credit, it's 2 cents. So you know, from an energy standpoint, we'll get there. From a money standpoint, not so much. But so it's an interesting way to look at things, you know, in terms of what we feed back, we only get 2 cents back for, and we all pay 12 cents. So, you know, it's another little technical thing that means we will always pay something for energy. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, Julie, this has just been fantastic. What I would like to do is have us all just come into a little quiet space for about 5 minutes and just kind of acknowledge and absorb what Julie's talked about, what struck you, what kind of caught your attention. So I'm just going to invite anybody who's on the call and those of you who are going to watch this video afterwards to just set down whatever you might be holding and find a way to just be a little more comfortable and solid. However you're seated, let your feet be really flat against the ground so you're really connecting to the energy and the gravity in the place where you are right now. If it feels right, you can close down your eyes or just even lower your gaze. And let's all just take a full inhalation first, just really filling up with the energy and the enthusiasm and the joy of this talk. And as you exhale, just imagine that you could release all the busyness of your mind, any tension through your shoulders and your belly, through the hips and glutes. And let each breath just follow that deep inhalation, complete relaxation on the exhalation. Let your mind meander to the concept of a visionary activist and imagining Julie's path over so many years. All the different things she tried or thought she wanted to do. All the people that she knew and made connections with. The things she was driven to do to support her children, her family, to support her innate need to make a difference with what she knew about energy and climate and soil and earth. That concept of being driven, that if she has to work all weekend and every night, it's what she's called to do. And the joy on her face is, yeah, she looked back on it and they were difficult times, but boy, they felt good. And it felt good to have been able to step into that visionary activist's role and actually make it happen. With your next couple of breaths, I invite you to notice what things you are impassioned about. What are you drawn to? Because physically you need to make something happen. You need to be in your garden, or intellectually there's something you need to learn or read more about, some concept you're not aware of. And recollect those things that you are already doing to make a difference. Organizations you partner with, friends that you call when you read an interesting article, conversations you have with your family, maybe your employer. And take a moment to notice with gratitude what people like Julie all over the world are doing, the impact that they're having, the uplift, the joy, the enthusiasm. And notice that little bit of gratitude within your own heart for what drives you, what you're already doing. And you visualize the impact of your own activism. And for the next couple of breaths, I invite you to recollect and reflect on your own level of resilience, how you're nurturing your heart and mind and spirit and body. And the acknowledgement that the more supported and nurtured and resilient you are, the more effective and the more joyfully you'll be able to offer your gifts out to the world. So with a full inhalation and exhalation, I invite you to open your eyes. And for just a moment, as best you can imagine it, make eye contact with everyone that's on this call. Just individually, who is this community? And it's a small community. A number of people have texted they needed to leave early. But these communities are out there and they're all over. We are not alone at this. So I want to thank Julie. We have a few more minutes. I want to talk just a little bit about the Resilient Activists and some of our upcoming events. Next Sunday, March 28th, a week from tomorrow, we have Sarah Jaquette Ray, who is the author of a field guide for climate anxiety. And she's going to be speaking at our event with some mental health professionals from the University of Kansas and from the Lawrence, Kansas area. I hope that you'll attend, and I hope that you'll share that link. All these events are on our events page, and that you'll share that link with anyone that you know who is struggling with eco-anxiety, environmental grief, pre-traumatic stress, any of these new mental health terms that have come out about how we're dealing as a human species emotionally with what's happening on the climate. The next climate conversations, so we meet the third Saturday of each month. The next one will be April 17th, which is heading into Earth Week. And we're going to do something a little bit different. We have A.Y. Young is going to be our speaker. It won't be an interview. He is one of the 17 young leaders designated through the United Nations. He's here in the Kansas City area. He's the only one in the United States to be promoting the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. He's also going to be the headline speaker. Oh, we got someone coming in on the call. He's going to be the headline speaker for the Kansas City Climate Council's Earth Day event, which is at 11 o'clock on April 17th. So we're going to meet at 10. He'll be with us on that call. We're calling it a watch party for the Climate Council's. They have 2 days of Earth events, and it's amazing presentations. I'll put all the information in the follow-up email with the link to register. And you kind of have to register for each of the events separately. But AY will be on the call with us going into detail on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, because a lot of us kind of know what they are. Maybe you've heard the word or something about SDGs. And what is he really promoting as a young man? How is he bringing more awareness about them to the United States as he travels around. He's a musician, and anyway, cool guy, just thoroughly entertaining, and you'll enjoy that. And so we'll meet for an hour, and then we can all get off the call and go log in individually to the Earth Day festivities. And then if you want to take more of their programs, you just click, it's all free. On April 24th, we're going to have a half-day deep nature connection retreat. It's Interwoven, which is an Earth Month retreat that I'll be doing in partnership with Tracy Ochester from the Midwest Alliance for Mindfulness. And that's going to be our first hybrid program. We have a site out in about an hour's drive west of Kansas City, out in nature at a retreat center where we can be very seriously separated, right? That we can really follow all kinds of safety protocols outdoors, but it'll also be offered on Zoom. So it'll be kind of a hybrid. So you could be in your own backyard or out in, in nature somewhere with Zoom, maybe on a smartphone, and participate with that. On May 22nd, we're having our first Visionary Activist Workshop. So it's a 4-hour combination of deep meditation, journaling, analytical meditation, conversation, connection, and there's some specific steps that we take people through. The forest metaphor is one of them. Who is in your audience already? Who have you already been gathering? So that'll be our first public event of that. There is a cost to that. We've got a sliding scale, and we do have some scholarships available. And then finally, October 3rd to 8th, if you want to put it in your calendar, it's going to be our first, I hate to use the word silent retreat, but it'll be kind of silent retreat. And it'll be, again, it's in Kansas City, but we have, can do it as a hybrid. So we have some rooms available at a really beautiful retreat center in the city, but it'll be hybrid also. So we'll be online, again, with Midwest Alliance for Mindfulness. So all of that's on our event page, and I invite you to check it all out. I also invite you to make a donation to the Resilient Activist if it feels like our programming, most of which is at no cost, is of value to you, and we would really appreciate your support because it helps us continue to do what we do. So what I'd like to do is invite Julie to tell us just what's next for you. What advice might you have for someone who's got a burning passion? And if there's anything that you think the Resilient Activist could do other than the podcast, obviously, that we're going to do together.
Scheduled.
Yeah, I've already got it on the calendar. I'll call you. Just, whatever you'd kind of like to leave the group with.
Okay, well, first of all, Sammy, I think everybody wants to thank you for starting the Resilient Activist and for making us, even those of us who've been doing this for a long time, think of ourselves maybe in that way. And I think you just now called everybody to say, what in your life can you be doing? Whether it's some small thing in your yard or something that you're called to do. And you and I were both called to do something. And we listened to the call, and I think that's the next piece, is really listening to what you're called to do. And for each one of us, that's going to be different. And just to honor that whatever your piece is just as important as my piece, because it takes all of us. So it's a big thank you to you. You are such a light and love in my life that I love being, getting to know you. It's been wonderful. And then I look at everybody and I go, okay, so, there are easy things that you can be doing. And I hope if Greenability can somehow give you some ideas, then go on. If you're not already signed up, and sign up. It's free. You'll get it every Wednesday morning. And, and then if you decide to strike out and do something and you need to let other people know, well, guess what? That's what I'm here for. So reach out. I'm big on doing events, promoting other people's events. I like to promote the Resilient Activist events, except for mine, which Sammy had to talk me into. So yeah, you know, and if you've got a business that you think you want to reach my audience, yes, of course, you know, I would love to have you as an advertiser. We can talk about that. There are so many different opportunities. Or if you want to post a job, we do have a job listing if you've got a job that you want to post. But mostly I just think it's, you know, I just appreciate people that are interested enough and curious enough that they plug into whether it's what Sammy's doing or I'm doing or some other organization is doing, just so that we keep learning and we keep remembering why we're all here and how we're all connected and how it does take all of us. So maybe I just leave you with that thought. I'm glad we're all in it together, and thank you all for giving your first day of spring, your first spring morning to this program.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, so inspirational. So I have one last question. It's for Julie and it's for everybody in the group here. How else can the resilient activists support you? What else do you need or would you like to hear or know? Or, you know, we bring on so many visionary activists. We have, I didn't mention Cheryl Hammondtree was on earlier, the one with the clothing company that she was talking about the inks with, and she's going to be our guest at our May meeting because she's very early into this, into making the switch from a typical t-shirt company into a fully sustainable company. And she's in the midst. This year has been her year for that. So I'm just curious if anyone has any other ideas or comments or things that that we could help with, that we could offer and support. Anybody? Anne, yeah.
Sammy, I would like a listing, and I've thought about contacting you by email, of a retreat possibility or several retreat possibilities of like earth-friendly Airbnb places. Airbnb does not specify that sort of thing. And sometimes as I look at entities in this area, for instance, Overland Park, it's not always apparent what might be rented out. I would like to just go by myself someplace. And sometimes it's just a tent, which would be great, but I am at the age where I probably need a little more comfort and perhaps a bathroom a little bit closer. So yeah, that's my request.
You're welcome. Okay, so first of all, I have an answer for you. There's a company opening in May in Kansas City that's going to be offering glamping close in nature in the greater Kansas City area. And I don't know that I have their name. I saved it. Hold on, I'll bet I do, because I just saw it posted on, oh, I can't find it right now, but I'll put that in the link. But I would bet that Julie is aware of some green travel organization or some way to know how to find a green spot. Julie, do you have some ideas about that?
You know, I do. And I'm thinking now, of course, you know, this is where that memory thing comes in, because I try to do a story in the beginning of each summer where I really go out and research, like, what are the different options? And so right off the top of my head, it's not coming to me, but I could go back. And again, I could, if there's some way I can post it on Sammy's website, but I try to look at, like, what are the ways that you can travel in a very environmentally friendly way? And so I have found some places, and again, I just can't remember the name of the company.
We can put it in. We can put in the follow-up email, so that's fine.
Great. Yeah, it's like an Airbnb, but it is for if you want to be out in nature. So it's these really cool places where you can go stay in a tree house, which I totally get that bathroom close by thing, you know, but whatever. It's still, you're in a tree house. Yeah, or you're in a yurt, or you're just in a cabin that's run by solar, totally run by solar energy out in nature. I mean, there are some very, very cool options. So I'm sorry that it's not coming to me, but Sammy, you tell me how I can get that to people, and I will send you that link, because, and there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
They look so fun. Yeah.
That's great. Anybody else? All right, watch your email. It'll probably take a couple days. Have to do a little editing on the video and get it uploaded and so on, but we will send the link out. And you're welcome to share it, of course, with anybody, and hope that you'll check out the calendar, because there's way more that I didn't even mention that we have, especially during the month of April, all kinds of events happening. Would love to see you guys at all of them. So anyway, I think we're done. Julie, thank you. You make my heart beat. And
Same, Sammy. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone on the call.
see you guys.